What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the What's Good Games podcast. And now we are going to begin the segment that you have been requesting for the past couple of weeks. Normally, this is where we would talk about what we've been playing, but what we've been playing, besides Animal Crossing, which we'll talk about next week, has been Final Fantasy VII Remake. Thank you to Square Enix for providing us copies of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Disclaimer, out of the way. I don't even know where to begin with a spoiler cast for Final Fantasy VII Remake. Maybe with a spoiler warning, as in like a full, like, yo, in case it wasn't clear that this was a spoiler cast and we're going to be spoiling the game, it's going to happen. If you have not finished Final Fantasy VII and rolled credits, you may want to press pause on the podcast and come back to this after you have. Or if you're like, you know what, I'm good with it, you just get on this ride with us. But now you have been properly warned. And on that note, Brittany, to you.
Oh God. Okay, so I think the best way to start this off is by dissecting the ending, because I think that will help us have the conversations about things that happen and maybe who some characters were. But first, we need to have a little discussion and come to some mutual ground here. So so I think it's obviously okay to talk about the events that transpired in the first Final Fantasy game and that run parallel with this game. However, there are certain relationships, like between Cloud and Sephiroth and Aerith, that I think we shouldn't dive into, because I think there's a lot of new people who have been introduced to the series, and I don't want to spoil those pivotal moments. Now, granted, as we know, going forward, we don't know what's going to happen in the next installments of Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Or when we're getting them.
But that said, I think the way things are lined out and the way that the events unfolded in the beginning, actually for the majority of the remake, that leads me to believe that a lot of the canon, who Cloud is, who Sephiroth is, that those things are all the same, and I don't want to spoil that.
Okay, yeah, no, I think that's fair, because I also,
Okay.
One of my major pet peeves, actually, about, like, granted, this was, 30 hours-ish, but I was actually a little more irritated that they didn't dive a teeny tiny bit more into who Sephiroth is. Like, I didn't need them to do a lot with him, but I wanted them to do more than just be like, oh, he's bad. Like, he big evil man, big sword.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm like, but why? Like, give me any sort of shred of information, because clearly, Cloud, you know him. You're having weird flashbacks. You're clearly not okay, which is a whole separate issue. You keep saying you are, you're not. Which maybe is a metaphor for all of us. Who knows?
Maybe we all have whispers surrounding us. Okay, so let's kind of like talk about the first thing that I think is important before we dive into the ending. And that is the Whispers, the arbiters of fate, the protectors of destiny. Now, these dudes or girls or whatever, these robes.
They're basically Dementors.
There we go.
They do look like Dementors, for sure.
They are not.
Remember, those were in the first game? I don't remember them at all.
I don't know. Yeah, so these are not in the original game. And you can kind of think of these figures as rabid Final Fantasy VII fans who don't want any changes to happen to the story as it was in 1997. And what I mean by that is their purpose is to keep Destiny and Fate on track. An example of this is toward the end where Barrett gets stabbed with Sephiroth's Matsumune, or whatever, his big spear. Right?
It's big old sword.
Oh, the big sword that he constantly shows off and is like, look at my long sword. I'm going to point it at the camera. It's long.
Do you see how big this is? It's taller than me.
My sword is. Anyway, yeah, so in the original game, Barrett does not die there. Or maybe he doesn't die at all. Who could say? But that's like not his time to die, which is, even though you see him get stabbed.
Wait, but Barrett didn't die.
I know,
but because of what Brittany's getting to.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Right. So think of the Whisperers are trying to hold up the main events of the original Final Fantasy VII. Might get a little meta here, but stick with me and let me know if you have any questions. Okay. So yes, when Barrett gets stabbed, he should have died from that, right? But the fact that he didn't is because the Whisperers interfered and were like, nah, dog, this isn't how it goes down. We're going to make sure you're still alive. Think about in the church with Aerith and Cloud. In the original game, Aerith and Cloud flee the church, And in this game, you see the Whispers literally pick them up and shove them through the door to get them out, and then they escape. They like literally had to like force them to fucking move. And another example is Wedge. When you guys are in Sector 7, Wedge originally dies there, as does Biggs and as does Jesse. But in this game, Wedge survives that whole scenario. And then toward the end, though, we see him getting shoved out of the Shinra building, and all you hear is the glass shatter, and then you're left to assume that he did fall to his death, right? Because Wedge was supposed to die. He was not supposed to live. Is this making sense?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, the Whispers, I was like, okay.
Okay.
Once they finally explained like what they were supposed to be doing. Obviously, up until that point, they don't explain it until you're almost done with the game. But yeah, once that explanation came through, I was like, well, all right, sure.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I'm glad you did the comparison with the original, because I didn't know, like, I couldn't remember all of the details of what had been happening.
And I have questions about that, but I'm going to hold them until you're done with your explanation.
Okay, cool. Because, yeah, if you had never played the original Final Fantasy VII, you wouldn't know how the events specifically are to unfold, right? For me, I had a feeling, I knew what the Whispers were when they were surrounding Jessie when she's in Sector 7 and she has the grenade in her hand, right? And she's like, I never miss. And she went to throw it, but the thing, like, detonated a little early. And that's where she died. Because as she was getting to throw it, the Whispers interfered because they're like, no, dog, you have to die up here. And same with Biggs. When you see him kind of slouched against whatever metal he was slouched against, you see the Whispers circling him like, okay, we've done the thing. Like, this is what's supposed to happen to you, and this is why we're here. And at that point, I'm like, oh. So it was kind of cool watching the rest of it.
Except he's in like a hospital bed at the end.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother thing. Okay.
Which is super weird, because I was like, the thing collapsed on you, right?
Yeah,
Like,
the
all
whole
of it
pillar was
sandwiched.
encased in explosive flame. Like, there's no way that Biggs would have survived. There's no way, really, that Wedge would have survived. I mean, I guess, like, he's at least a little bit more of a plausibility because he was on the ground, and it's possible that, you know,
He
with
fell
how...
in a hole, which is what they think they are alluding to. He tripped and fell into this hole.
And you find him in the sewer,
facility.
right?
Yeah, and he did survive that encounter, but then when he's in Shinra, remember, he kind of gets forced out the window, right? By the Whispers at the very end. And I think he said, like, I just wanted to make a difference, and you hear the glass shatter.
And you're like, you poor baby squirrel.
And we don't know about him. So I agree with you with that whole Biggs theory. So, like, let's hold on to that for a second. So I had this recap of the ending from Vice.com, just because I think it could be a good refresher.
Sure.
So the game concludes with a battle against Sephiroth, but to challenge him, the characters have to first defeat the Whispers of Fate. In the moments leading up to this, the characters witness flashes of the original game's storyline. Cloud sees Aerith die. The entire group watches Red 13 and his children running through the ruins of the old world. They make the conscious decision to fight fate, to banish the Whispers, and to chart their own course. And with the Whispers defeated, they're able to do so. The characters are outside of Midgar in a vast and open world, uncertain of what the future holds. The unknown journey will continue, the screen reads, as the camera pans up into the clouds, implying that the future is open to change, that continuity isn't as important as telling a good story. Now, the tools to create have at their disposal. Okay. So, that moment for me was pretty fucking crazy, because when they were fighting the... Oh, what's the word? The Whispers. All of the big
Harbinger
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, whatever the fuck they were. You got the three little boys and you got the very, very big boy.
Yeah.
And you were seeing the flash of Red 13 running up that mountainside, which is kind of like an iconic scene from the end of the original Final Fantasy VII. You see Aerith, her death scene as she's trying to summon Holy, you know, which is... I can't go into that. You see these things happen, and then
Wait. I don't mean to interrupt you, but are you telling me that the final boss fight we got at the end of Final Fantasy VII is actually the final fight of the whole game of the original?
No, she's saying that when you had those flashes when you were fighting him, those were some of the ending parts of the original game. Like, those were some of the ending scenes.
Of that part of the game, but not of the whole game, right?
So, okay, I'll try to explain this again.
Okay.
In a better way.
I mean, like, it's admittedly very confusing.
Oh, girl, no, it's fucking confusing as hell. Okay, so you have all of the characters, and they're on, I think this is before they're getting ready to fight all of the big Whisper bosses. They're seeing flashbacks. So you see the flashback of Red running. You see the flashback of Aerith dying, or of her praying. you see other little flashbacks. And this is the quote, and maybe this will help you remember. Someone asks, what the hell are we seeing? Probably Barrett. And Red says, this is what happens if we fail today.
Yes.
And that was before all the final bosses. But what that, because I've played Final Fantasy VII and I've seen that ending, when we're seeing all of those scenes that I know are the ending of Final Fantasy VII, and he says, this is what happens if we fail today, immediately I'm like, this is an alternate timeline.
Yeah.
And that's when my mind just fucking, anyway, Andrea, are you following or is it still confusing?
I'm admittedly going to be confused, but
okay.
I think like there's more questions I have than just that. So
No, that's fair.
Continue on.
Okay, so we'll kind of like cover some more of the ground here. So you have the whispers, the big boy, and if you use your assess materia on the big boy, it says this guy appears when someone tries to alter destiny's course, and then if you use the assess materia on the small guys, it says they are an entity from a future timeline that has manifested in the present day. They protect the future that gave shape to it. So like right there shows that you are fighting essentially against these things that are trying to prevent alternate timelines or prevent fate from being changed. So
all this is making me do is it makes me want to go and watch original Final Fantasy like information because I don't remember. I played definitely I had Red 13 when I was playing Final Fantasy VII whenever I did like 10 years ago. But that's as far as I got as I had him for a little while and then I didn't play it again. So like I never made it to the ending. I never made it through a lot of these pivotal moments. And so to know that now theoretically they're trying to alternate timeline it, and I want to kind of compare like, okay, well, what was the beginning of that game like again? Because again, it's been a really long time to the beginning of this, and what would they be fighting against, and what are they fighting for, and like trying to map these things out, I think is interesting.
Yeah. So the TLDR, Andrea, in simple terms, is that you have the original Final Fantasy VII from 1997, right? In that game, as people know it, is you have Cloud and Tifa, and back then Ares, and Sephiroth, the big bad guy, and everyone knows that Ares in that game dies. It's Aerith. It was a translation error. And then the game like goes from like start to finish. Cool. That's the 1997 game. This game starts off making you think it's just more or less of a remaster, right? A complete remake of this game. There are a few things that are a little different, but if you don't know any better, you can kind of write it off to just being some extra padding and fluff, which some of it is. But the idea by the end of the game is you learn that the Whispers are essentially there controlling fate, and they are there to make sure the events that unfold in the remake unfold as they do in the 1997 game. However, at the end of the remake, they essentially say, fuck fate. We're going to destroy all of these arbiters of fate and protectors of destiny, and we are going to make our own path going forward.
Yeah, that's super cool.
And so is maybe Aerith will stay alive. Maybe, that's why we see Biggs alive, is something fate has been changed. That said, okay, sorry, I'm nerding out, so let me know if I'm getting too far ahead of you here.
It's okay. We'll bring it back after you're done, because you're on a roll, so just keep going.
Okay. I'm so excited, Joey.
But then we'll roll it back to earlier in the game.
Okay. So, actually, you know what? No, I'm not going to go there yet, because that is too far ahead. I'm going to pull myself in. Okay. So that's where we're at.
Okay.
Sounds good. That makes more sense. I'm glad that you explained it. But I mean, that wasn't I didn't get that they were the whole nuance of it. I kind of generally understood what was happening, but that was about it. I was like, okay, yeah, sure, we're fighting fate. Did we fight fate before? I don't remember fighting fate before. And like, these were the conversations that I had with myself.
Yeah.
As I was playing, I was like, I don't think I remember this, but it's possible I just forgot because I forget everything. So I don't know. Maybe this is how it goes. So that is very helpful. Thank you.
I got you. And if you go back and you look at some of the dialogue that Aerith, Sephiroth say during the game, some of it kind of sticks out and you're thinking like, oh, okay. Because the thought is, and this is a real deep cut theory, is that this Sephiroth is the same Sephiroth from the 1997 game, but he has somehow been able to transfer his consciousness into this game, and he knows that shit's about to hit the fan. And he knows he fails in the 1997 game.
I'm calling bullshit on this fucking theory. Oh my fucking
here's the
God.
dialogue. So there's the fight with him and Cloud, right? And after you defeat him, Sephiroth says, and you're on the edge of creation. You're on the edge of creation. Sephiroth says, "Careful now. That which lies ahead does not yet exist." Basically saying this pre-written destiny that you are subjected to in the 1997 timeline no longer exists because you basically said fuck destiny and you're going on with your bad self. He continues to say, our world will become a part of it one day, but I will not end, nor will I have you end. Because Sephiroth obviously croaks very badly. And then he says, "This is the edge of creation. Cloud, lend me your strength. Let us defy destiny." And so if you look into that and some of the other things that he does say, because he does at one point when you first see Aerith for the first time, he says, "You can't save anyone, not even yourself." Because in the original game, Cloud is too late to save Aerith before she dies by Sephiroth's hand.
So Sephiroth, but why does Sephiroth want to kill her anyway?
I assume that is a spoiler for the future.
That's a pretty big story.
Right. Oh, so okay, let's talk about Aerith since we're bringing her up.
There's one more point I want to say to that. And then during that Edge of Creation conversation, Sephiroth says 7 seconds till the end. He says 7 seconds till the end. Time enough for you, perhaps, but what will you do with it? Let's see. So if you go back to the 1997 game, it's exactly 7 seconds for the time Sephiroth appears to where he kills Aerith. If you watch that cutscene.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So
that's interesting.
There's little hints in there, and even Aerith.
Yeah, I was wondering. I was like, 7 seconds. What the fuck are you talking about? Like,
yeah. Yeah, and then kind of going back to this, somehow their minds have traveled across different timelines. Go to some of the dialogue from Aerith. When she first meets Cloud, she says, when she hands him a flower, she says, "Lovers used to give these things when they were reunited," which you can look into that as deep as you want, but there's multiple reasons why she's familiar with Cloud. We'll just kind of leave it at that. When she's getting ready to
I mean, it's pretty obvious if you say that they hook up at some point.
When you are getting ready to
I love
go
you,
through,
Brittany.
You're totally wrong. When you go through the portal of fate, she says, "Boundless, terrifying freedom. We won't be the same." Basically, they're defying fate, and she knows that. And when she has a conversation with Cloud, she says in chapter 14, if you picked her for your conversation, she says, "But whatever happens, you can't fall in love with me. It's not real." And there's some other things in there that if you've played the original one, those are things that line up with her knowing those events that took place. So the time travel thing or the consciousness, it sounds really fucking weird, and it is really fucking weird.
It's Nomura. It's Nomura-san.
It's Nomura. Yes.
Nomura-san stamping his weird ass shit on this game, and it's probably going to be what makes me not like the second game.
Here's the thing that I will give them the pass for. If it's Aerith and Sephiroth, aren't they the two remaining? Oh my god, I'm blanking on the names.
The ancients.
Ancients remaining. And wouldn't it somehow make sense that if you're that in tune with the planet, you may understand timelines that may or may not exist?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's interesting.
If it was everybody, I'd be like, go fuck yourself.
And that's the interesting thing to you, Andrea, is I'm wondering because are they gonna the next game, right? Are they gonna make it so fucking weird? Or are they going to make it so you wouldn't know any difference since you hadn't, you would just think this is like the new canon version of Final Fantasy VII. That's going to be interesting. Like how weird.
Yeah, I don't think you would know, Andrea. I don't think you would understand. I don't think either of us, unless we sit down here with Brittany and get the rundown of exactly what Final Fantasy VII Original was, we would be like, they say some weird shit sometimes. I don't know. Okay, let's go. Let's smash some shit with the Buster Sword. That's. No, that's kind of how I felt when I finished this game. I was like,
well,
all right.
Yes and no. So here's the thing. Before we get into some of the plot beats and how we thought about them, overall, and I've talked to other people who never played the original and played this game because of its high praise that a lot of people are giving it, including us. And they're like, but why did it jump the shark at the end? Why did it go off the rails narratively in the final throes of the game when it really had what I thought was a solid narrative all the way up until you enter the Shinra building And then it's the longest ending of any game I've literally ever played. And I thought Halo games had the longest endings ever. Turns out it's not. It's not Final Fantasy VII Remake. I was like, this has got to be the last scene. This has got to be the final boss. Wait, there's more? Are you fucking kidding me? How is this game not done yet? That was me during all of the end. Because, like, the game makes a big fucking whoop-de-doo about you entering the Shinra building, right? They're like, yo, finish all your stuff. Once you go in, it's going to be a long time before you leave. Are you ready? Are you sure? Did you do all the side quests? Are you ready to leave? Right? So I appreciate that, which BT dubs, they didn't do that earlier in the game. Why I failed a couple side quests, so kind of fuck you. But, like, that's another conversation for another time. Instead, I was like, cool, it's going to be done. And then it wasn't done for several more hours.
To the world of JRPGs, baby girl.
That aside,
I knew it was gonna be until you fight Sephiroth, so I was just like, all right, I haven't fought him yet, so I guess it's not over.
Essentially, we all knew that there was going to be some kind of confrontation with him, right?
Yeah.
But what I think was really frustrating is that I thought they did such a great job of building up a narrative between Cloud joining Avalanche, what Avalanche beef with Shinra was, kind of understanding why Shinra is the big bad, and who these individual players are, and kind of how it plays into Cloud's backstory, which we don't really know anything about at the beginning of the game, right? And I think it all built really evenly throughout the game to a way that they introduced characters, and I was like, oh, this is actually like, I was really impressed. And then at the very end, it just went completely off the fucking rails.
It did.
And I was like,
That's
okay,
fair.
now I know nothing about what's happening. And I suspended my disbelief about the whispers, because I was like, this is clearly going to come back and tie into something. And I think the thing that hit me as somebody who had never played the original and who had stayed away from the Final Fantasy franchise at large was that there's just way too much going on from a fantasy perspective that I can't ground in narrative realism. And it doesn't need to be real, right? Like, I love fantasy. I love all kinds of fantasy. I love sci-fi. But, like, the flow of narrative beats just did not connect in ways that I got really frustrated with. Now, to be clear, I still loved this game. Earlier in the podcast, I said it's still my game of the year so far. That holds. But, like, I'm just like, but, what's going on?
The only part where I felt like, I mean, as we've already kind of discussed, I was obviously a little jolted at the end, but I think it is because I didn't have a lot of the context that Brittany just gave. And
Yeah.
I was just like, wait, what? Oh, huh? Like, okay, guys, sure, whatever. Like, who the fuck are these people? Who the fuck is Zach? Who, like...
We'll talk about it in a second.
But yeah, like those are the things that were running through my head. It's like, why? Why are you throwing these people in at the last second?
It really picked up really fast. And yeah, I mean, obviously, not knowing what I know, it's kind of hard to remove myself from that. But I'm imagining, even if I was at first like slightly confused about it, and so was almost everyone I've talked to that's played this game that's very familiar with Final Fantasy VII, it does take you a while to like understand it. But if you don't know any of that context, that was probably like one of the most confusing endings probably ever.
Yeah, it was. I think the thing for me that was really poignant after talking to you about it was I think about the fact that they killed Jesse, and then, or first they killed Biggs, then they killed Jesse, then they kill Wedge. Like, that's like the whole, like, your Avalanche crew that you start the game with, right? They kill all three of them, and I was like, wow, like, you expect at least one or two major characters. And I had heard people being like, ooh, does Aerith die or does Aerith live in this one? Because, like, it was impossible to avoid that as a spoiler on the internet. Just it was. So I was like, oh, well, I'd really grown attached to Aerith by the end of the game, and I was like, it feels unfair for her to die, but, like, I was eager to see, like, how they were going to let it unfold. But then when you told me that the events in Midgar happened in the first, like, 5 to 7 hours of the original game, I was like, wait, but then, so what happens for the rest of Final Fantasy VII Remake? Like, what else is there? This is, like, a complete story. Apparently, a lot more.
Yeah, and where the not disc one, but yeah, like where the game ended is, where ideally is where everyone escapes the Shinra building and they stop on that broken street and then they kind of like look out, and then it's like, okay, now you escape Midgar. But that was kind of where they stopped, the game here, and that's what I was going off of. And I got through the whole Midgar section, and I got to that point by about 5 or so hours when I just played the game. Maybe it was like last year I replayed it, but it's crazy. This whole thing is just crazy, and I really like some of the padding they put in. The side quest with Tifa and the side quest with Aerith, because we never got that kind of interaction with those characters. And before we get to the end of this game, you just kind of assume that it's going to continue playing out as it is, in terms of like, okay, well, all 3 of the Avalanche crew, they're going to die in the Sector 7 explosion, which is maybe like a few hours in, then that's the end of it. But it's interesting that you get to see these characters in new positions, and you get to know them on a personal level. And I think they did a really great job. Granted, I think it was just also, like I said, part of padding, but it was still interesting because we didn't get that in the first one.
Can we talk about how Biggs is way hotter than Cloud?
Yes, we can.
Biggs is great.
I was like, I would 10 out of 10 take Biggs over Cloud any day.
Literally any day. He's more charming too.
Yeah.
He is. He has a good heart, and he started a little
He started an orphanage, for crying out loud.
Yeah, I don't actually care about that part, but yeah. Oh, I mean, like, so long as I guess to keep the kids over there at the orphanage, that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you guys have any questions about things, let me know. Like Zach, I know Simon was asking about Zach earlier.
Oh yeah. But before we get to Zach, can we talk about a character that we at least know was part of the party and will be in the next game? Well, at least like I just assume. Red 13.
Yeah.
He's the fucking best. I was so Brittany and I talked a little bit about him in our own personal texts, because I was like, oh my god, I'm so excited for Red 13, and I like, he was my favorite, and then you dropped the bomb on me that he's not like
playable.
He's not playable. He's not like the way that I had him in my party when I started playing the game a million years ago. But I was actually super, super happy with how he folded into the story and how they incorporated him into the game, even though technically he's not always a party member. He's still useful. He's still there. I love his voice acting.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, I just think he's great, and I'm super, super happy with it.
Yeah, he's a really fascinating character.
Yeah. So tell me why, because I've talked to several people who've been like, Red 13's my favorite. So why is he your favorite from the original games?
Me? Granted, I didn't play long enough to like really get to know any of the other ones.
He's a red lion, tiger, dog.
He's he's like a red cat dog that talks.
He's like Peaches, right? But talks.
Yeah. He's just and I liked a lot of the dialogue, and I was like, he's so cool. And I don't know, maybe I have a soft spot for lab animals, but it was I just always thought he had like a really cool personality. But I don't really love a lot of the characters in Final Fantasy VII yet, and I didn't even back then, because like Cloud's a little stoic for me, obviously. Tifa's fine. Aerith can be a bit teehee, and Barrett just yells a lot, which it's more of a volume.
This is my normal talking voice. I'm Barrett. I just always talk like that.
Oh, he really does.
He has beautiful eyes. Oh my god.
He has very nice arms as well, but yeah, no, it's just more the register of the voice. I don't like it when people yell. I like quiet time.
Excitable. Yeah.
Marlene! Where's Marlene?
Marlene!
Just the whole time.
That's something I'm really excited about the next games is going forward. It really should expand on who these characters are and like what their story is, because I think each character has been given a very fascinating backstory, including, I mean, obviously Red 13. Like, he's not a normal character, right? But I think his story is really great. And same with Barrett. He has a very interesting arc, and I'm excited to see how Square expands upon that, knowing that it could be something completely, well, I guess the origins are probably going to remain all the same, right? Because it wasn't toward the very end where they really fucked shit up. But this is where it starts like melting your mind. Like that stuff with Zach toward the end. Like what does that mean?
I don't know, because I don't know if that, I can't remember if that, I didn't finish the first game, so I don't even actually know if Zach's a real person.
Yeah, so let's talk about Zach. So I pulled up this Kotaku article that says, let's talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake's mind-boggling ending.
Reading that, because that could spoil some very, very interesting Cloud arcs. So.
Sure, I will not read. I'm not going to read the whole article. I just pulled it up to bring up some very specific points.
I just don't want you to be spoiled, Andrea.
Nor do I.
It's really interesting shit.
It'll take 6 years.
I
to
mean,
get the full story.
I think that you don't understand that I've gone down a rabbit hole trying to figure out what the fuck happened at the end of Final Fantasy VII. So I've read a shit ton of articles about it. So, like, also, like, the thing that I wanted to bring up and the reason I mentioned this article was because at the end of it, this is one of Jason Schreier's last pieces when he was still at Kotaku. It says, the title of the game suddenly makes sense. There's no part 1 on the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake because this is the only part that's a remake. From here on out, we're in uncharted territory. And while we'll certainly see the characters and locations of Final Fantasy VII from blank and blank to blank and blank, I'll leave it blank if you don't want to listen or hear them, the events are going to be completely different. As the end Chiron says, the unknown journey will continue. He
That's
says,
actually interesting. I didn't think about the title.
Yeah.
yeah. So people there's a lot of, obviously, there's a ton of fucking speculation after the end of this game about, like, what's going to happen. When's the next installment coming? What's it going to cover? How many episodes are there going to be? Et cetera, et cetera. I do think it's because of what they've done with Fate and the Whispers and changing Fate and playing with the narrative of the first game and weaving it into something that clearly they wanted to do differently this time around. And maybe it's people who worked on the team originally and were like, yo, this is, like, in hindsight what I wish I would have done. And maybe now I'm getting my chance to, like, rewrite history quite literally. And obviously Nomura-san's stamp on this is very obvious, like, throughout the game, at least in my mind. Like, I didn't play the original, but I see, like, the flashes of what Nomura-san has contributed. And I just hope that they can continue to maintain balance, because I thought this game narratively had great pacing, had great backstory, and great moments for you to really identify with these characters. And then it just, like, went so far off the rails at the end that it makes me nervous in some ways for what's coming down the pipeline.
Yeah.
I don't feel like it went. Oh, go ahead.
I'll say it's going to be interesting to see if they kind of keep it on course. Is this going to be a playable game on its own? You know, do you need to know that this is an alternate timeline of sorts? See what they go with. And going back to what you were saying about, you know, maybe some writers from the OG game saying, like, well, maybe this is what I would have done differently. There's been a long-standing rumor that Aerith perhaps was never supposed to die. Now, whether you want to think about that from a narrative standpoint, or if you want to look at a few things, there's some cover art, or maybe it's just art that was in the original manual, and she's looking at a big airship, and this airship isn't accessed until much, much later in the game, like very post-Aerith death scene. So it's like, so why was this key art included in this manual if she was going to be dead by then? There's also a scene where it looks like there's a spot where a character should be standing. Everyone else is, like, lined up and she's not there. So, like, obviously this could just be 23 years of fan rumors going around, but it's been thought that maybe she was cut due to time constraints or budget, or who knows. I mean, I hope
they were just like, sorter.
Just stab her. We'll see. We'll just move on without her. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with her. And it'll be interesting to see if there's a possibility of them making this like this is a very, very, like, outstretched thought, so bear with me, but, like, kind of like a BioWare game in terms of choice and consequence. You know, now that Aerith might not be the one who dies, like, who could it be? Could that depend on some of the choices you make? We did see some choices have, like, a very, like, you know, cosmetic purpose in this game, like in chapter was it 9, the Don Corneo mission, where you got to choose, like, the dress based off of the decisions you made or the side quests you had done.
No, you didn't get to choose the dress. The dress was chosen for you based off how you interacted in specific conversations.
That's what I meant. You got
right?
yeah, exactly. So choice and consequence, who knows? But it's kind of fun to think about. But like Steinberg keeps saying, when the fuck are we getting it?
Yeah. So I definitely have a lot more questions that I'll just ask you offline, since you've been very clear that you don't want to talk about them on the show because you don't want to spoil people like me that haven't played. But I'm very much like, I don't care. Let's talk about it. So we'll talk about it later.
If you want to have, like, an I don't care, we can talk about it. We can put a little disclaimer up if we want to go into that territory. But
well, I think that there's a couple of more conversations we could have before we get there. Like, when we first talked about it with you last week, there was a couple of plot points that differed from the original that you're like, let's wait and talk about it in the spoiler cast. what were some of the moments for you playing through Final Fantasy VII Remake that you really liked that they did differently or that they expanded upon, whether it was stuff with Tifa's storyline or Aerith's storyline, that you were like, I think that this was a good move for them to do?
I think, well, for one, I think the whole Honeybee Inn scenario was obviously so much more well done. In 1997, there were some questionable themes with Cloud getting bum rushed by about 8 dudes in a hot tub or like a bathtub, and there was some like weird noises that were being made. So obviously, I think like that was very tastefully done. I thought just the stuff with Cloud getting, an apartment in Sector 7 slums. I thought that was a fun little touch because that never happened in the original. And then obviously like the big stuff was the stuff at the end where you see that Biggs has survived. You see, and next to Biggs on that desk there, you see Jessie's bandana and her wrist guard. So was that just like pulled off of her corpse, or is she somehow alive too? Like, it's just the speculation of what's going on, what happened, and the stuff with Zack, which I think, we should probably not talk about right now too.
Well, we're gonna talk because I have questions.
Is Zack's in the original? Because I just don't know if these characters are new characters or not new characters.
Zack is he plays a big part in the original, but he's not actually like a playable character.
Yeah, I didn't mean he was playable. I just meant like, does he exist in the universe or not?
Yeah. He's a part of the game.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was like, because as soon as can I tell you what my thought was when he first showed up?
Yes.
I was like, oh my god, Cloud just stole this guy's identity. Like, I'm just like that's what I thought, because when you first see him in that cutscene, like, you think it's Cloud with like dark hair for some reason. You're just like, oh, weird, he had a bad dye job.
Yeah, like, why does he have the Buster Sword? What's going on here?
Yeah, and then you're like, wait, why does he have the Buster? And I was like, oh, and I didn't realize that Cloud was still wearing this soldier uniform, but just like minus a pauldron. And so, I was like, he has Cloud's outfit, he has Cloud's sword. Cloud just fucking, like, once it was revealed it was not actually Cloud, just a very surprising lookalike. Yeah. I was like, Cloud fucking did this guy dirty. He probably shanked him and then took his sword and stole his turtleneck onesie and made off like a bandit. Like, that's where I thought was happening. And then obviously you see at the end he's carrying Cloud. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe not.
Oh no, Zack and Cloud have a very I'm just remaining quiet, but I'm laughing because they have a very, very fascinating
I'm sure. I thought you would enjoy my dumb thoughts.
I do appreciate that. Like, he probably shanked him.
I was like, there's no way that these two people can exist in the same universe. One of them must have killed the other and absorbed their soul. I mean, it's Final Fantasy. I feel like that would be
it could happen,
right?
It could happen, yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask one thing also.
Yes.
That I'm not sure. Whatever, you can answer vaguely.
Okay.
Is there a reason for Sephiroth's eyes being the way that they are? They're like weird cat, or there is a reason.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll ask all these questions in just a few seconds because I have a lot of questions that I want to ask that I want you to answer. But I get that you want to leave another disclaimer of being like, okay, so we've had our spoiler cast on the remake. If you want to opt out now, you can. But before we do that, is there anything else about the remake that you want to discuss that you think is fair for discussion?
Well, I guess I think you talk about Roche. He was kind of an interesting character. I think we talked about him a little bit on the last week's show. He's the soldier third class. He plays an interesting part.
The motorcycle bay.
Yeah.
Wait, but he wasn't wearing the turtleneck.
No, he wasn't.
And he was like, this is why I thought he stole his fucking life, is because you see other soldiers and they do not wear that uniform.
It could be because he's soldier third class and Cloud is soldier first class, so they might have different uniforms.
They probably do.
Let me look up what he was even wearing because I don't remember. Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of interesting. Let's see. Just keep going.
Why don't you have a picture, you dumb fan site?
And then stuff I think we talked about, or maybe we talked about this off air last week, how you could get the chapter 14 conversation with Tifa or Aerith or Barrett, depending on the choices that you made, whether or not you favor Tifa or Aerith. In chapter 10, if you went to Tifa first, that could impact the scene where you get Tifa. If you were just an asshole to everyone, you get Barrett.
I'm sorry. I was Googling Roche to see what his outfit was.
Uh-huh.
And it says, people also ask, the first one's normal, who is Roche, Final Fantasy VII? The second one is Jessie from Final Fantasy VII a girl?
What?
What?
I don't know why. That's why I laughed.
Why is that even a question that people are asking? Who cares?
I'm so confused.
That's weird.
I don't know. It's a strange.
It doesn't even matter if she's a girl or not.
I know, but that question made me laugh.
All that matters is that we're gonna forever make fun of her for how thirsty she is.
True.
Oh,
There's another question under there. Did Jessie like Cloud?
Oh, what the fuck do you? Well, maybe.
No, but that's what we hypothesized, Steimer, when you and I were doing the show together. I was like, what if we find out that Jessie has just been playing Cloud this whole time? She's been a Shinra double agent from the beginning.
Well, not the Shinra thing, but Wedge does basically say, like, don't fall for it.
It's all like a game to her, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, she's an actor, so.
I really like that. Oh, and that was the other thing, too, is before I knew, like, these characters were probably going to survive, or at least some of them were, it was so depressing after you come back from, what mission is it? I think it's the one where you get her father's ID card, and you parachute down, and then you run through, and Wedge shows you where Biggs lives, where Jessie lives, where he lives, and you see Biggs out, like, sweeping the ground, and you see Wedge out with all of his cats. Like, at that point, I just assumed that they all were going to die. And the music and the tone was so perfectly nailed. It was such a somber experience. Because I think they did a good job with these characters and made them much more personable and likable.
Yeah,
no, they were cool.
I was legit bummed that they all died. Like, I was kind of hoping that they would leave the door open for it to seem like they lived, but like they didn't. And then when they brought them back, I was angry. I was like, yo, I am not above you leaving an ambiguous end to somebody and being like, could they survive? But don't do this definitive goodbye scene where they're like taking their last breath in front of somebody and be like, oh, well, they just were unconscious instead. It's like, no, fuck you. Cloud wouldn't have left them there if they were still alive. He would have like figured out a way to get them down and like focused on saving their life. Because he's the secret hero that we know he's going to become, that he's just struggling against right now.
Yeah, so when it comes to Wedge, I understand how he's alive because he had the grappling hook, right? And it did not break his fall, essentially. Like, he fell off, and then he comes back.
Yeah, but then they show a giant piece of debris falling on him.
Oh, right, and then
before he makes it to the Shinra building.
And I was like, you're like, yeah, he fell, and that was fine, whatever. And then he was still alive, and I was like, all right, sure. But then he clearly is going to be pinned under like a ton of concrete and is somehow fine because somehow managed to again fall into the one hole that exists. That's a Shinra lab. So that was a part where I was like,
no, that's kind of stretching it. As far as so this is kind of the part where it kind of ties into that ending scene where they destroy Fate, and like I call it Destiny Dust, where all the sparkles fall down. It's like, oh my god, because as you see that scene with Zack and Cloud, they're looking over yonder, and he looks at everything kind of falling down, and then immediately from watching Zack and Cloud, hobbling away or whatnot, it pans to Midgar where you see Biggs in bed, like recovered. So I'm wondering if that itself is an alternate timeline, or is it possible that the actions that Cloud and company did affects like the past and present, or just the future? Like, we don't know, and this is why it's like, how are you going to tie this up? Or are you going to completely Kingdom Hearts this shit?
Oh no.
What happens?
Yeah, I don't know about any of that. I do kind of wish they just left Biggs X all dead because I think it opens up too much in terms of weird possibilities if it can go back in time and somehow fix it. Or are they saying that they've been unconscious this whole time and now the fairy dust has
settled,
recovered them? Like, they're like, now they've gone from coma to like, okay, maybe they'll get out of it. But again, you are usually not in a coma when you pass out from lack of blood loss and then a pillar falls on you.
True.
Usually you're just dead.
And so part of me wonders if that was mostly just for the dramatic effect of, well, I mean, it should be explained narratively, but like, of like when they were panning and showing that shot and I saw Jessie's bandana and her glove, I said, okay, if this next shot shows Biggs or Jessie in bed alive, then at that point I was conjuring up my theory that this is an alternate timeline. I said, if that's gonna be it, that's like the nail in the coffin, then I know for sure this is what they're doing. And then as soon as they showed it, I was like, oh my God. So that was kind of an indicator to me. But again, like if you don't know that, it probably does come across as a cheap little like, hey,
we kept the hot guy alive.
Yeah. So, because someone must have found him and carried him up to bed, but like, how did that happen?
I don't know either. Magic. Someone's got some magic hands up in there.
Oh man, I just want that sequel now. I just want it now.
I mean, I do
so
too.
Curious, but I want them to. I hope they do a better job answering a lot of the questions they kind of brought up and then just never addressed again. Granted, again, this is only the first portion of this game. But as we mentioned at the beginning of this, literally anything about Sephiroth, I'll take. Please tell me what the fuck is going on. And then, Zach came at the very end, but I was a bit of like, okay.
Okay, so I think now is a perfect time to say, should we like give another deeper level spoiler warning and then actually talk about this?
Cool.
Unless you don't want to, Steimer, because I have questions that I would like answered. But I can do this with Brittany aside if you're like, I would rather not know.
Part of me doesn't want to know, and part of me also realizes it's probably going to be 5 to 6 years before we
and
get
it could be very different. Yeah.
So I guess I'm fine with it because I'm probably, you guys know me. My memory is crap garbage. I'm going to forget
by next.
So I think we're fine.
Here is a very deep level disclaimer. If you don't want to know what the relationship is between Cloud and Zack, or what Cloud's backstory is, or what Sephiroth is, then now is the time to say goodbye.
If you want to preserve the narrative experience you've had, not playing the original game, only playing the remake, then thank you so much for hanging out and listening to the show. We hope you've enjoyed the Spoilercast so far. And if you are like me and you just must know, then please stay with us. Okay.
Are they gone? Okay.
Okay. Are they gone? Everybody look around. My cat's just wandering around the studio. What are you doing over there?
This is being handsome.
Are you killing spiders? There's so many spiders.
Baby Sephiroth. Would you say he has cat eyes or like lizard eyes?
I would go lizard.
I couldn't decide if they were reptilian or cat-like.
They're alien eyes, Steimer. Because Sephiroth is half human, half alien.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay.
But
wait, for realsies?
Do you classify the ancients as aliens or as humans?
He's not an ancient.
Oh, okay. There you go.
He thinks he is. Okay, so I'm going to try my best to explain this lore because it's kind of crazy. Okay, so you have the ancients, also known as the Cetra race, I believe. Cetra, C-E-T-R-A.
Yeah.
They were like these like awesome creature humans.
They were the hippies.
Humans. Yeah, they were the hippies. They like lived in like lavish forests and waterfalls and blah, blah, blah. And then one day, this alien named Genova came and kind of like, I believe, fucked everything up. And
was
somehow
Genova the asteroid?
Genova is that you know what Genova is?
No, I know, but I meant like in the Shinra
they
hoopla,
do like
they're like there's the asteroid, and I'm like, is that the asteroid is really Genova
I'm not entirely sure on that. I just kind of have like the base, like the bullet points down in my head. So all I know is somehow Shinra gets Genova, and then they think Genova is part of the ancients. They thought that Genova was one of the ancient races, of what Aerith is. Obviously, like what they didn't know is Genova is not, but they mistakenly think Genova is. So what they do is they take human, like babies or maybe even fetuses at that point, and they take Genova cells and inject them into the babies in order to create what they were hoping to recreate the ancients.
The ancients, yeah, okay.
Right.
Because they want the promised land where all the Mako is.
Right, they do that. But what they found is that, this doesn't create the ancients, but what it does create are these super strong humans, hybrids, which is what Soldier is. So Soldier.
Got it.
Sephiroth is a soldier. Was a soldier. And then
is he an ex-soldier?
No.
He's the Papa ex-soldier.
And this is where it gets really interesting, where the plot points can get kind of spoilery if people aren't careful. So Cloud, okay, so you have Zack. This is Zack. This is where Zack comes into play. Okay. So Zack.
Cloud shanks him.
No,
Absorbs
I
his
wish.
soul.
That would be a lot more interesting. That'd be
He's
some,
like
true
Shang
crime
Tsung,
bullshit.
is what she's trying to say. Your soul
So-
is mine.
You
Yeah.
had Zach, who is soldier first class, and his whole and there's a whole game dedicated to this. I don't remember what the name of the game is, but he's a soldier first class, and all along he just wants to be like the great Sephiroth, because back then Sephiroth was like a badass, like, ooh, look how cool he is.
Yeah, they
So-
allude to that a little bit in this
Right.
game.
So he joins soldier first class.
Crisis Core.
Thank you. He falls in love with Aerith.
I
But
was
the-
actually about to ask. I was like, wait, was he the one? Because she's like, I loved a soldier. He was also first class. And at first I was like, Sephiroth? Are you in love with Sephiroth?
Yeah, no,
And then
that's Zach.
and then as soon as Zach was like dragging Cloud's poor ass around, I was like, nah, she probably loved this guy because he looks exactly like Cloud. So I'm glad that I was correct.
Well, yeah, and we'll get to that too. So Zach inherits the Buster Sword from his mentor. At that point, Zach meets Cloud, who failed to make soldier, so he was just a gunman. But they bond
He
over the fact that they
failed.
both kind of like came out of like middle of nowhere towns. Like, this is my understanding.
Is that
So-
the middle of nowhere town haircut? Is that just what they give everybody?
That's exactly, yeah, that's what they get, the spikes. Like, they can't
Yeah.
control the spikes. That's what they have to do. Okay, so Sephiroth reads Sephiroth, and then they go to the town where I believe where Cloud and Tifa grew up. Sephiroth discovers that he thinks he is an ancient, right? And then he descends into madness, and he thinks that the humans are nothing but blood-sucking parasites, which, like, let's be honest, we are. He destroys the entire town.
And that's where he kills Tifa's dad.
Yeah, he kills Tifa's dad. Around
Why is she in a cowboy outfit?
that's just like her outfit. I don't know. It's
Because
weird.
like in all the other flashbacks where she's with Cloud, she's wearing normal clothes, and then the one where her dad is dead, she's in a fucking western.
Well, she was the tour guide. She was showing Cloud and Zach and Sephiroth the Mako reactor, is my understanding, and that was her outfit. Little country bumpkin. I don't know. That was
That's
her
so
thing.
weird.
Japan.
Sephiroth goes crazy. Cloud then kills Sephiroth with his spear, I believe, or his weapon, the whatever the thing it's called. I can't remember. It's the long swords. Anyway, Hojo, remember Hojo, captures Cloud and Zach, runs experiments on them, decides that they're failures, puts them in a freeze chamber. It basically freezes them for I don't know how long. Zach breaks out. Zach takes Cloud with him, who is still kind of like, whoa, which is in that scene with him and Zach. That is Zach carrying Cloud
away from the laboratory.
Right. But here's the thing, is in the original timeline, Zach is killed at that scene. He does not survive.
Oh, where he's fighting all of the soldiers, or not
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Not
the
soldier,
Shin-
but the other
Shinra. Yeah. And worth noting that when they were being experimented on by Hojo, that they were both injected with Genova cells. Okay. And that's the
Okay.
big alien. Okay. So Zach is dying. Zach is like, yo, dog, I'm dying. Take my Buster Sword. When Cloud grabs the Buster Sword, this is my understanding, the Genova cells between the two of them interact, and Zach's memories imprint on Cloud. So Cloud now thinks he's a soldier first class. Cloud now thinks that he's done all of these things, but those are just Zach's memories, and Cloud has little to no memories of his own anymore. So Cloud
Whoa.
Yeah. So Cloud
Cloud
never made it to soldier.
Is
Cloud,
fake.
Cloud doesn't even remember who Zach is at this point.
Well, so I
so-
mean, I knew he wasn't, obviously, because they even say that in the game, right? Like Hojo's
Right.
like, "Oh boy, you weren't a soldier.
Yeah.
You were a you get cut off." So I thought that was interesting. I wanted them to answer more of that too, because I was like, "Well, what the fuck was it? He clearly is something." And then when Genova was there, and he's like, "Mom," I'm like, "Mom." But I guess my question, because you said earlier that soldiers were babies or whatever that were merged with the alien cells, but like that's not how Zach or Cloud entered the program. They were regular kids. So were they still trying to do like stem cell research on slightly older children too to become a soldier?
So here's my understanding is when Hojo took Zach and Cloud and ran experiments on them, he injected Zach with Genova cells and infused him with like Mako and whatnot. But because
Mako.
Mako. My bad.
Mako.
But because Zack had already gone through that process to become a soldier, he wasn't affected by it. But Cloud obviously was, which is why Cloud is kind of like the badass that he is today. So I think it's probably why Sephiroth is like super epic, is because they got him when he was like a fetus or some shit. But I think if new people want to join Soldier, they get injected when they're already like full human.
Okay, so they do both. They do a little Kame, a little Kame.
Yeah, I believe that's the case. It's kind of it's really funky lore, and it's still like kind of hard to wrap my head around it. But
maybe it's like Witcher mutant shit.
Maybe, yeah. And
it's
I'm
like,
sure if I'm wrong,
it could either be a baby or it could be older.
Okay, here we go. What is Sephiroth? It's an attempt by the Shinra Corporation to resurrect a Cetra by using the genetic material of a long dead being called Genova. Genova was mistakenly believed to be a Cetra, an ancient, but was actually an ancient alien race that almost destroyed the planet 2,000 years prior. While the subjects of Project Genova were not Cetra-human hybrids that Shinra wanted, they turned out to be incredible beings of immense strength, speed, and fortitude. Lacking imagination, Shinra made them the top tier of their super soldier program.
Lacking imagination.
Yeah.
Sick burn.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So that's why with the Zack scene, when you see him, like still living, carrying Cloud to Midgar, you're like, what? Like, is this Zack should be dead in this timeline because Cloud has the Buster Sword. Right. So is this just another alternate timeline? Like, are we going to be playing between alternate timelines in the next game where Zack lives? Like, that would be fucking mind-blowing.
I don't know if it'd be good, though. I feel like here's the thing. There's, like, so many of these different tropes in literature throughout time about messing with time and time travel. Oh, my God, you're my favorite husband ever. I texted John and was like, we're having, like, thank you so much, darling. We're having a deep cuts conversation about what the fuck is happening in Final Fantasy VII. Please bring me tequila.
Time travel, lots of tropes.
And he gave me my talking point as he walked away. And I think that, what's dangerous about it is that you get into a situation where narratively you're making caveats for almost anything and everything, and then the integrity of your story falls apart, right? When you're like, oh, you woke up and it was all a dream. And it's like, that seems like a really easy write-off, right? So this idea of, oh, well, Destiny is writing it off. It's one of the reasons why I think a lot of people, this is a very different game, struggled with what they were doing with Chronica in Mortal Kombat 11, because we just watched Mortal Kombat. I was thinking about that story. Like they made a godlike creature, or literally like an elder god who could move time. You can move time around. And when you get to move time around, you can literally make excuses for any plot hole that exists. And I think it's just a slippery slope to sloppy writing. And I hope that they don't slip down the slope, is what I'm trying to say.
Hey, no, I hear you. They have to tie it together.
Yeah.
It could be done, but if it is, like, ooh, that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think they could just basically have, even if Zack was supposed to die there, it's similar to Wedge, right? Like, where he'll live maybe a little longer. Maybe you do get to play as him for a quick minute, because I think that they could probably easily copy paste his animation with dark hair and be just fine. But then, he does die. Like, he'll have to die, right, at some point, because he's got the sword. And it just
Yes, like you said, unless that's a total different timeline where Zack is. That's why it's like, how are they going to do this? Also, where that's kind of interesting is Tifa. The reason Tifa's so hellbent on keeping Cloud around is because she knows something's like up and something's not right. So if you kind of like look at her dialogue through that lens, because later on in the game, in the original anyway, Cloud starts retelling part of his time in Soldier, and all of his scenes in this Soldier are just him and Sephiroth, when in fact, like, it's not Cloud and Sephiroth, it was Zack and Sephiroth, but he has Zack's memories. So when he's retelling all of these things, Tifa's like, yo dog, something like is not right with you. So that's why she wants to keep him around and keep such a close eye on him. It's because he seemingly just like comes back out of nowhere claiming to have made Soldier when she knows he never did, because he came
Wait,
back.
she knows that?
Yeah, she knows, because remember when she did the tour in her little cowboy outfit?
I mean, I don't remember her actually giving a tour in that. I just remember her seeing,
the scene of her in her cowboy outfit is after Sephiroth had killed her dad.
Right.
And that was when Sephiroth, Zack, and Cloud had all come back to their hometown to do a tour of the Mako reactor. And
Mako, like Taco.
Yeah, there we go. And Cloud was in his gunman outfit, and Zack was in his soldier outfit. So Tifa knows that Cloud never made soldier. So she knows all along that like there's some shit going down.
That's so crazy to be like, I'm just gonna play along with this because you're
It's
clearly
fucked
mentally
up,
disturbed.
I think is what you mean to say. That's awful. It's awful. It's awful that Tifa is playing dumb. It's awful that Aerith is playing dumb this whole time. And I think that that's a weakness, and it bums me out because I like both of those characters, but I don't have respect for people who intentionally deceive to such a great length.
I don't know.
You don't
Okay,
think
so
that
this is the problem is what would they say to him at this point? I mean, I understand what you're saying, but if they were to say like, yo, Cloud, like, this is not who you are, he'd be like, but I have all these memories of doing these things because in his mind he does. Because all those memories were imprinted onto him, which is why he can do all the really cool moves and whatnot. Because that's Zack's shit. So, like, I hear you, but it's kind of like, well, how would that conversation go?
It's a delicate balance, I think, at least in terms of Tifa, because yeah, if she knows that's not the case, and you have a friend who's come back after a while and is kind of spouting off, like, seems off, right? Like, can do these things, but didn't make them. I feel like you wouldn't be confrontational about it just yet, especially because he does like the weird staggery shit at times, like clearly is having issues. So, like you're like, okay, my friend's clearly having some mental problems here right now. I don't know what the fuck's going on, but I think right now the last thing I need to do is challenge him on it and try and like push him further.
Sure, no, I'm with you there. But I think that there's a way to have that hint of a conversation without fully going into that conversation, to be like,
sit down with the tequila and be like, so
are you okay? Which I feel like Cloud has asked a million times actually.
Yeah.
Are you
like,
okay?
Are you okay? And he's like,
What's
yeah.
going on?
And I'm like, you're clearly not. Like you either have a lot of migraines, which you should get checked out, or blood sugar issues, which you should also get checked out.
Yeah, that's true. But no, it's interesting. It's going to be to see what they do with that info, how they like reveal it.
So how many more playable characters are there in the original game based off what we had this time?
You have Sid, you have Kate Sith, or is it Cat Sith? Is it Kate? It's Kate Sith, isn't it?
I don't remember.
So you see a glimpse of Kate Sith in this game. It's that little cat-looking, little fuzzy-wuzzy little cat that like runs out as Sector 7's being destroyed.
Yeah. Also, like, it's almost like, why did they even bother with that? I guess it's just a nod for people, but like it was such a small thing. It's a nod, and
I think Kate Sith also appears in that scene in the original. I can't remember, but okay. So you got Cloud, Tifa, you got Vincent and Yuffie, who are two optional characters that you could recruit, but they're fantastic characters. So I really hope they make them, and you can miss them if you didn't know what to do, right? So I hope that they bring them back. Red 13, and then Kate Sith, and then you have Sid. I think those are
what
playable
the
characters.
fuck is Kate Sith? What
that's
is
a fascinating
this?
question. Oh, I don't know if you want me to spoil that. But,
I mean, this is exactly what we're doing right now.
Okay.
This is the deep spoilers. Yes, please.
I want to read it.
Kate Sith is Reeve. Remember Reeve? He's the guy in charge of urban development at the Shinra company.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to read the other thing.
Okay.
It's an anthropomorphic remote-controlled plush cat toy.
Yep.
Standing over just 3 feet tall with short black fur and a white stomach and face.
Yeah, so he is controlling Kate Sith through who knows what means. I don't think we ever really truly figure out how he's doing it.
Magic.
But, yeah.
So it's just when you Google Kate Sith, you see this cat on top of like
a giant thing,
a blob, like a Kirby-like, but it's got like a head with.
I think it's supposed to be a Moogle of sorts.
The fattest Moogle of all time. I don't know.
It looks like a Moogle does. I don't know, like a weird Moogle with weirdness.
Wait, and so you say this is the guy that was in the Shinra Tower?
Yeah, he's if you
the nice
Google,
guy.
The nice guy, Reeve.
Yeah, the guy who's like trying to do the rebuild process, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he's concerned about the actual city of Midgar.
Yeah. So he's the one controlling Kate Sith, and the players don't really find out till like obviously much later. He's like, I'm actually a good guy, and you're like, oh, cool,
interesting.
Yeah.
Gosh, there's there's just so much. I feel like this is why I've always stayed away from Final Fantasies, like the weeds of it. That I'm like, okay, this is just like too fantastical. Like I love high fantasy and I love imagination, but like when you let your story go so far off the rails that I'm like, okay, really, I have to eye roll every plot beat that you're going after now. Like
it's kind of like
that's where that's where I have trouble.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. It's obviously, all of this info that I'm dumping on you guys is like spread out over the course of probably another 50 to 60 hours or so, if not more. But it's definitely a thing with Final Fantasy games, right? That's why they're just not for everyone, is they do get fucking weird. And to me, like, it's not all that weird because I've always played these games and it's just kind of what I've come to expect. But if you're so new to this, you're probably thinking like, okay, this is getting like a little too much.
Well, because like Andrew, you've said it multiple times. You're like, it's off the rails at the end. And I'm like, actually, I don't think it is. Like, I really don't think it is. Once I had the context Brittany gave, I thought it was off the rails in terms of I didn't know what the fuck was going on when I just played and finished the game on my own. But now I'm like, oh yeah, no, I can see all of that. And like, maybe that's just because I've played
yeah, right. I think
before.
It's like, okay, that's to be expected, right? It's like when you
yeah, okay, cool. I am on board. I understand what's happening. And cool, we'll just see what happens next. And like, I'm very curious to see how they handle, obviously, a lot of things in the next game. Because as we've said, could kind of go either way. Could be fucking brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
Or it could be a dumpster fire.
I am just so excited to see what they do. I'm in. I'm so in. And Andrea, I hope you stick with it too. I hope you're not too off put by all the hard truths.
Oh, no, I'm not. I'm definitely, obviously, now that I'm in, and like, it was interesting. I mentioned this in the show last week when we were talking about it. My sister being a huge Final Fantasy person and forever wanting me to play, and me always being like, no, dog, not for me. And after playing this, she's like, so what do you think, you're going to play more Final Fantasies? And I was like, hard pass. The thing for me that really grabbed me about this was that the characters felt relatable. They felt real up until the very end. And more importantly, I really liked the combat in the game. And the combat in this game is unique to this Final Fantasy. There are no other Final Fantasies that do it in this exact way. And so I think it'll be tough for me to go to others. But if they follow this formula and, maybe refine some of the traversal things that we had little gripes about, I think that the next game is set up for success as long as they keep the story on rails, because this has forever been Kingdom Hearts' problem, right? Like that Kingdom Hearts has a cult following of people that are like, this game changed my life. This game means so much to me. But the mass audience is like, what the fuck is happening in this game? I mean, and that's like Nomura-san, right? And so I think that there needs to be a balance between how do I control a narrative that's relatable to people in a year like 2020 and be like, okay, like let's keep it together because there's so many other amazing fantasies and amazing other narrative stories that are just out in the world today. Like the amount of narrative work that's happening today is greater than it has ever been at any point in history. There's so much to choose from. How do I make this story compelling for audiences that maybe didn't give it a shot before? Because you can't just do fan service. You have to make it better, right? And take it to the next step. And like, how is Square Enix going to accomplish that is like the big like rhetorical question.
Yeah,
I do wonder if mechanically they'll keep, because I think that they were very particular about the way they did a lot of the stuff in this first game. For instance, as we've discussed before on prior podcasts, the fact that you can't switch your party members, the game just switches for you, and like they took Red 13 out. Like there's certain things where they're like, we're actually making these choices for you. You don't get them. But I wonder now that we're kind of in uncharted waters a little bit more with the game, if they will start to allow those elements back into it. And if in the next one it'll be like, well, now actually you can have whoever you want in your party with you at all times, depending on what's happening in the story. I hope that they still obviously keep the leveling thing the same, so you have to really worry about that. But giving you a little bit more freedom to engage with characters as you would like, I think might be interesting.
Yeah, I would hope they would. And most JRPGs do that, right? And Final Fantasy games do that. It's, especially you have 7-8 characters in your roster. I can't imagine them working the story in such a way that those characters aren't going to be available, at all like times, or at least during most of the gameplay, right? They should all be there at some point. Y'all are a team. There's no reason why you're going off here and there. And now that especially it should open up to more of a, I can't see them going like full open world, obviously, but like something along those lines where it's like, okay, we all got to stick together because, there are parts in Final Fantasy VII where you do split up into teams. So I guess that like makes sense that was incorporated into this game. But I'm with you, Steimer, because that's fun. That's part of the strategy of it, right?
Yeah, I always liked. I didn't miss it too much in this because it was only a 30-hour experience. But right, isn't that ridiculous? But I really like that part, and I like building synergies with my team and being like, okay, I know for sure this person has these spells and they have those, and like that's the team I've built, and these are the people that are going to hang out with me for pretty much the next 80 hours. And I didn't really I missed that a little bit with this, but I also thought that they did it for a good reason and it made sense, so I was okay with it.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be interesting. Oh God, that felt so good. Oh, I feel so good now. I feel so like liberated.
Good. Do you feel like you left anything unspoken about? Is there anything that you're like, God damn it, we didn't talk about this? Even though we didn't talk about Wu-Tai, but we can talk about that some other time, I guess.
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother can of worms.
We'll leave that can of worms.
Yeah, I'll leave that one. The other thing I just want to say is that final fight with Sephiroth when One Winged Angel was playing. I thought that was so good.
What do you mean? Is that a song?
Yeah, so One Winged Angel is probably, I would say, the most famous Final Fantasy VII song, or probably even maybe the most famous Final Fantasy song. It's Sephiroth's like theme, especially
where they're like yelling his name,
dancing into the background. Yeah. So I always listened to that song even before I even played the game because I thought it was so good, and they always played at all the concerts I'd go to, the video game concerts, and hearing how they've taken that song, which is already pretty fucking intense, like. If you have a few minutes, friends, go watch the ending of Final Fantasy VII, the ending fight with Sephiroth, when he like descends with his one wing and that song just starts playing. So good. Anyway, they took it and they just completely like remastered it in a way that's even more intense and even more incredible than the first one. And they extended it by like 5 or 6 minutes, I think. It is just so well done. And when they were playing that in the background and the way they were timing like the major chorus and the major beats and the chanting with the actions you were doing was so good. Oh. Anyway. That was just like the last thing I wanted to talk about. So I just wanted to give a nod to that song because it was just so good.
Do you feel like you've been cleansed, that your catharsis has happened?
I do. I feel like I can go like just take a nap now. I feel like all of my pent up frustrations in life have been relieved from me from talking about Final Fantasy VII with you two.
So now what are you gonna play?
That's pretty good.
You want to come play Destiny?
LOL.
Is this where I tell you that Yakuza Kiwami came out on Xbox One this week?
Yeah, it was really cute. I had someone say, hey, Yakuza Kiwami is on Xbox One, which is, it starts with Yakuza 0, and then it goes to Yakuza Kiwami, Kiwami 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm like, I'm almost done with 5. I am so far past Kiwami right now. I finished that game, like, I started Kiwami like an hour after I finished Yakuza 0. But I am getting close to finishing my Yakuza series, and then from there, I'm going to have to start playing something else. What am I going to do?
I can't believe how you just blasted through Yakuza.
Girl, I never, ever would have anticipated this happening. I mean, I am just, like, literally hooked. It gives me the same feeling I got when I was watching, like, True Blood, in the sense that you once you start one, you can't stop. Like, you want to see what happens.
Can of Pringles, baby.
Oh, yeah, and it's all the same characters, more or less, and there's so high drama and action. It's just, like, my perfect kind of, like, flick, but it's a game, so I'm just obsessed with it.
Well, we'll talk about your adventures in Yakuza next week, but we hope you enjoyed this Final Fantasy VII Remake spoiler cast and then the deep cut spoiler cast. Thanks for sticking with us, everybody, and thanks for supporting What's Good. If you missed the Patreon streams, don't forget to go to patreon.com/whatsgoodgames and watch the archives. And also, if you haven't marked your calendars for May 16th, it's our anniversary stream. We'll have more details to announce on that in the coming weeks. But for now, enjoy the rest of your weekend. We love you guys. Goodbye.